Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're wading into some pretty complex territory. We've got sources on everything from, historical conflicts and psychology to global sports, even ecological messes.
Yeah, and the goal is really to pull out the threads, find the connections, and how these big human systems can get, well, fragile. We're looking for those surprising lessons about how things work, or maybe how they break down.
Exactly. It seems like the big idea, the through line here is about nuance. How catastrophic failures, they rarely seem to come from one giant, sudden shock.
That's right. It's almost always these smaller, incremental steps, this kind of normalization of things going wrong. And we actually start with a really stark example, the Nuremberg trials. We looked at sources covering that film, the one using that raw, previously unseen Holocaust footage from 1946.
Right, that footage was key, wasn't it? To take what could have been a very dry, legalistic thing and make it accessible in a horrifying way.
Absolutely essential. But beyond the visual impact, what really jumped out from the sources was the psychological angle. From the psychiatrist, Kelly, who was actually there evaluating the major Nazi figure.
And his findings were unsettling, to say the least.
Deeply unsettling and politically inconvenient at the time. He basically concluded they weren't, foaming at the mouth crazy. For the most part, he found he was dealing with rational men. Fundamentally normal.
Normal. That's the word that always stops you. The idea that this level of systemic evil could be planned and executed by people considered psychologically normal, it just kind of blows up the easy explanation that they were all monsters or madmen.
It really does. It forces you to confront that it wasn't just a sudden leap into darkness, it was incremental. Philip Zimbardo talked about the boiling frog idea elsewhere, but it fits perfectly here.
Right, you don't just jump straight to the end point.
No, you'd never get there. But you take these small steps. Eroding rights, political division, dehumanizing the other. That's how ordinary people can get swept up in truly horrific things.
And that mechanism, that dehumanization, gosh, you see echoes of it everywhere today, don't you?
Yeah.
This push to get rid of the gray areas, split everyone into these extreme camps, red team, blue team. Like, there's no complex middle ground where most people actually live.
It's a dangerous simplification. And to bring that idea of, let's say, normalcy and slow decline into sharper focus, the sources really delve into Hermann Göring. He often gets painted as the simple caricature, right? The fat, corrupt Nazi leader.
Yeah, just the villain.
But his actual path is, well, it requires more nuance. Our sources pointed out he really struggled in regular school, like bottom of the class kind of thing.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, until he went to military school. Then something clicked. Structured discipline. He thrived there.
And became a genuine war hero in World War I, right?
Absolutely. A decorated flying ace, 22 kills. He even commanded the Red Baron's legendary squadron after Richthofen died. This wasn't some nobody. He was a legitimate national figure before Hitler really came onto the scene.
So you have this war hero feeling betrayed by Germany's surrender, looking for a way to restore national pride. One source called him a pure patriot in his own mind. And then he connects with Hitler.
Yes, sir.
Well, you can almost see the terrifying logic from his perspective.
And woven into that personal story is another system failure, addiction. Göring developed a massive opiate habit. We're talking 40, maybe 50 pills a day.
50 pills a day?
Yeah. And when he was arrested, they found, get this, 40,000 pills with him.
40,000? That's staggering. It really highlights how much this whole conflict was fueled by drugs, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. It wasn't just him. Tank crews were given Pervitin, basically meth, to keep driving for days. Hitler himself was heavily reliant on opiates later on. It definitely changes how you think about the decision-making, the sheer endurance for psychotic actions.
But there's a twist in the sources regarding Göring at the trial, isn't there? Something about him getting clean.
Yes, exactly. Being locked up forced him cold turkey. Apparently, the withdrawal was so severe it nearly killed him. But once he was through it, once he was clean, his mind became incredibly sharp again.
Wait, so getting clean, it didn't lead to remorse or anything? It actually made him better at defending himself?
That's what the sources suggest. His clarity made him arguably the most dangerous defendant in the courtroom. He wasn't pleading insanity. He was sharp, logical, challenging the very basis of international law from his position as a soldier following orders within his nation's structure.
Wow. That clarity used to defend the indefensible.
Yeah.
That might be the most chilling part of that normalcy idea.
It really underscores the point. Now, that theme of dependency, of addiction, it leads us pretty directly into another area the sources covered, behavioral addiction, specifically gambling.
Yeah.
and how it's becoming so normalized.
Right, and there was that striking personal story in there. Someone losing everything in Reno, feeling that physical vibration, that shaking, a really visceral description of the compulsion.
A powerful anecdote. And then linking it back generations. A great-grandfather, a professional gambler, losing the family home, impacting the family's finances for 2 whole generations afterwards.
Yeah, that really makes you think about the architecture of it all. Is there a potential genetic component, a predisposition?
It certainly raises the question. If someone has, let's say, an underlying vulnerability, maybe genetic, maybe psychological, what happens when society just removes all the barriers, makes it incredibly easy to engage in that behavior?
And that's the worry, isn't it? Especially seeing it so normalized. Like in Australia, where the betting odds are just part of the news and the apps. These things are designed for dopamine hits right in your pocket, especially concerning for young people who have grown up with that instant gratification cycle.
And this individual vulnerability, this potential for addiction, it doesn't just stay personal, it bleeds into the integrity of bigger systems, like sports.
Yeah, the sources brought up rugby league. The refs making subjective calls. When there's huge money riding on those calls through gambling, suddenly there's this shadow of potential bias or even corruption.
It opens the door, absolutely. Or the UFC example, where apparently some bookmakers were, the source said, woefully uneducated about fighters from certain regions.
Right, so people with actual inside knowledge or just deeper knowledge could exploit those weak odds. One tipster hitting 84%. That shows a system with a serious flaw, an information gap being exploited.
Exactly. Which puts us in this tough spot, doesn't it? Society values freedom, the freedom to gamble included. But these systems are incredibly profitable, heavily marketed. Is there a greater responsibility to educate people, especially the young, about the very real psychological hooks and the long-term damage bad decisions can cause?
That tension, individual freedom versus systemic risks and manipulation, seems to be everywhere. Let's shift focus slightly, but stick with systems. Thinking about the structure of global sports.
Yeah, this was an interesting contrast. You've got American sports like American football or baseball, where the absolute pinnacle, the Super Bowl, the World Series, it's all internal to the U.S.
Right, winning the World Series doesn't actually involve the rest of the world.
Pretty much. But then you compare that to sports like cricket or rugby. The ultimate achievement there isn't winning a domestic league. It's representing your country on the global stage, playing for England or Australia or India.
And the cricket test match was the prime example of that different structure, described as the gentleman's war.
That's the phrase used, yeah. A 5-day match between nations. It has this whole different rhythm. Formal breaks for morning tea, for lunch. It demands incredible patience, a different kind of strategic thinking compared to, say, a 90-minute football game or a quick basketball match.
I have a bath days. I think I need a break. Just think about watching 5 days of one game. It highlights a very different cultural approach to time and engagement.
It does. And that idea of structure, whether it's a 5-day game or the incremental steps towards historical horrors, it's often disrupted by something introduced from the outside. Which brings us neatly to ecological systems and unintended consequences.
Yes, the cane toad story from Australia. A classic case study in things going badly wrong.
A perfect example, they brought these toads in, 1937? The idea was they'd eat beetles that were damaging sugarcane crops. Simple solution, right?
Seems simple, but it failed spectacularly.
Completely. Because the initial tests apparently were done feeding the toads dead beetles. In the wild, the beetles could fly. The toads, with their slow, sticky tongues, couldn't catch them effectively at all.
A fundamental flaw in the plan right from the start.
A massive testing failure. So the toads, failing at their intended job, just did what toads do best.
Breed.
And breed they did. From just a few hundred initially. What's the estimate now? Sources say possibly 200 million. And they're still spreading, moving south, secreting poison that kills native animals, even dogs. It's an ecological catastrophe born from one bad, poorly researched decision.
And it's not an isolated pattern, is it? The sources mention kudzu vine in the U.S. Southeast.
Right. Brought over from Japan as an ornamental plant in the 1800s, now it just chokes entire forests. Or think about predator reintroduction. Yellowstone wolves, largely a success story, right? They brought elk numbers down by 75%, helped balance the ecosystem.
But contrast that with Colorado.
Yeah, the Colorado example mentioned was different, taking wolves known to prey on cattle and relocating them right into ranching areas. That seems like setting up conflict from day one, a poor policy choice compared to the more holistic Yellowstone approach.
So we disrupt these huge systems, historical, financial, ecological, and there's often a real cost, sometimes even a personal one, which leads to the next transition in the sources, looking at burnout. Specifically, an actor dealing with the fallout from intense work.
Yeah, the sources describe his crazy year, I think it was 5 films back to back, just led to total mental exhaustion, feeling uh, empty was the word used.
So drained, he apparently looked to his next big project, that Highlander remake, and just couldn't figure out what he could even bring to it anymore.
Exactly. And then, almost like fate stepping in, the production got delayed. His co-star, Henry Cavill, had that Achilles injury.
Right.
And the actor privately saw this delay as a kind of prayer answered. He just desperately needed a break. He needed some kind of systemic reset.
And he found that reset back in nature, on his farm.
That's right. He calls his property in Australia, about 1,700 acres, his panacea. It's the place he goes to step away from the Russell Crowe brand, as the source put it, and just be
Oh, well,
a dad, a farm boss, back to basics.
it's like a personal rewilding project. And he's actually doing literal rewilding too, isn't he? Planting thousands of trees.
Yeah, over 38,000 trees mentioned, trying to restore parts of the land to temperate rainforest. Using nature itself as the therapy, the restorative force against that systemic burnout from his working life.
And that connects to other work mentioned, doesn't it? Using nature for healing.
It does. The sources referenced Merlin Hanbury Tennyson's work, using rewilding projects to help soldiers dealing with PTSD. It really positions nature, in its, less structured form, as this vital counterbalance to the stresses and traumas that our highly structured modern lives can inflict.
So this whole journey today, from the chilling normalcy of the Nazis to the pull of addiction, the fragility of sports integrity, ecological balance, right through to personal burnout and recovery, it all seems to circle back to needing nuance, understanding complexity.
Absolutely. The world just isn't simple. It's not red or blue. It's this intricate web of interconnected, often quite fragile systems.
And that fragility, that complexity, it even applies to the information we consume, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. We're drowning in information, right? It's all on your phone.
Yeah.
But the sources really hammer this point. The structures around that information, political, corporate, media, money, they are actively shaping what you see and how you feel about it.
There was that point about political bodies sometimes finding it more useful to keep problems around to campaign against, rather than actually solving them structurally.
Yeah, that's a cynical but probably accurate take in some cases. And then you add media consolidation on top of that. It used to be dozens of major media companies 30 years ago. Now, effectively 3 control most of the narrative in the U.S.
3 companies, that's concentrated.
Hugely concentrated. And think about who funds them. Massive advertising budgets, especially from pharmaceuticals. If Big Pharma is paying a huge chunk of your bills, how critically are you going to report on, say, soaring healthcare costs in the U.S. or the fact that medical bills are a leading cause of bankruptcy?
It creates this potential conflict of interest, this closed loop where the narrative might be shaped by the advertiser's needs.
It's a system designed, at least partly, for manipulation. Which brings us to the final thought, the provocative question for you, the listener.
Okay, let's hear it.
Given everything we've touched on, the engineered narratives, the political spin, the corporate interests, the way media is funded and consolidated, you have to ask yourself, what percentage of the truth you encounter every single day is actually shaped, maybe subtly, maybe not so subtly, to serve someone else's financial or political agenda?
And more importantly, what steps can you personally take to build better filters? How can you try to separate the genuinely complex reality from the deliberately simplified, often manipulated version you're being fed?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Learning to navigate that information system critically.
A huge challenge. Food for thought indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll catch you next time.